You are listening to a special best of edition of the Laura Ingraham Show. Why settle for less when you can get the best?
The Laura Ingraham Show.
855-40-LAURA. We're going to have a conversation about this very uncomfortable and horrifically sad topic of teen suicide, or just suicide. I mean, I'm sure radio talk show hosts, all of them today, are just talking about politics, and there's a lot to talk about. But this issue strikes me as one that we as a society spend a lot of time emoting about, but don't really have an in-depth conversation about. You always see stories about how, well, grief counselors have been dispatched to the scene. Now, I don't know what grief counselors do. Maybe there's some benefit to the grief counselors being there, and they have workshops or people share their feelings, and maybe there's some benefit to that. But for me, it seems like we're missing something that our young people are missing today. Maybe it's our presence, maybe it's our attention as parents, willingness to actually have an uncomfortable conversation with our kids, difficult conversations that can be awkward. Maybe we don't want to believe that our kids aren't perfect. When you have kids, as I have 3, there's this old saying, you're only as happy as your least happy child. And I can say, in my now 7.5 years as a mother, boy, there's very few things that strike me as true and indisputably true as that old saying. Because if your kids are hurting, you're hurting. If a child is hurting, you're hurting. If it's emotional, if it's struggles in school, if it's difficulty in focusing, if it's someone being picked on, it hits you as a parent. If you're an engaged parent, that is. It hurts. And you struggle to come to the right conclusion. You ask whether there's anything you could have done, or you question your decisions as a parent, whether, gosh, didn't I see this coming? And I have little kids, relatively still small, even though they're getting so tall. Oh my gosh. Maria's 10 and a half, going to be 11 in a few months from now, and Dimitri's going to be 8. And you look at pictures and you're like, oh my gosh, where did it go? Where did the baby go? The babies are gone. There are no babies anymore. They're all gone. They're all big kids. They look like bigger kids every day. Maria looks like a teenager already. It's scary. But I first got word about this Monday afternoon because, of course, my friend's son is in this class. And we were in Iowa, Drew, and I think I told you, I got the email. I'm like, oh, I mean, it's like I felt like my heart physically went down into my stomach when I read this. Because, of course, as a parent, you think of, there's no words. You can't even go there. There's no words. So we don't want to go there. We don't want to really talk about it. We see a story in the New York Times or in a local paper, and then we move on. What's at the bottom of all this? And we also understand now, in the way they've studied, especially teen suicides, that they tend to come in clusters, oftentimes, where one kid kills himself, and then another and another in short order after that. What is that all about? Is that something to do with social media and academic pressure put on high school students? Has been blamed for contributing to suicide clusters, where one kid is just so distraught he or she has to keep up a front of, I'm perfect, I'm a varsity athlete, I'm applying to Princeton and Harvard, and I am in 3 AP classes, and but inside the child is hurting. Child's hurting. And at least 5 communities in the United States every year experience a youth suicide cluster of 3 or more suicides, according to Madeline Gould, professor of epidemiology in psychiatry at Columbia University. She's an expert in this topic. Teenagers and young adults are particularly susceptible to what is called suicide contagion, possibly because of the role that peer relationships play in their lives. or because of because of the nature of their brain development, they are more impulsive. She said that the second suicide at Fordham Prep was almost certainly an instance of imitation, with the death so close in time and in the same manner, they have to be more than just a coincidence. Tom K., I'm not going to say his last name, he killed himself in our freshman year of high school, in Glastonbury High School. And I kid you not when I say I think about him, I think at least once a day. I see his face like I saw it yesterday. He had red hair, it was kind of a little curly red hair, freckles, funny. He was in all my classes. He was in Russian, Spanish, high, we called it high ability back then. It was honors. They call it honors now, but it was called high ability, algebra, all the classes he was in with me. And he's just one of my buddies. And one day I got a call from my high school sweetheart that he had killed himself, shot himself. I remember walking to the cemetery off the green at Glastonbury, Connecticut, and the procession of the students standing around his grave. I just remember it like it could be yesterday. That's how vividly I remember it. You know how some things in high school are kind of a little hazy, foggy. You remember things, but they're not clear. This is clear. I remember this. This just stayed with me. Like, why didn't I see this? Was it something I could have done? Apparently, he had some crush on some girl, and she didn't return his crush, and I don't know if that was part of it. But you're impulsive. You're 15 years old. You're raring to go, but you really can't go, right? How many of you have been affected by suicide? Two of my close friends have had their fathers commit suicide. And I'll tell you something, a parent commits suicide, and especially if a child finds a parent, you want to talk about a kid who takes that around for the rest of his life? Can be defining for the rest of your life. It's why it's called the unpardonable sin, because you don't have time to ask for forgiveness after suicide. Well, if it's mental illness, then there's, I think people think of it differently. And mental illness has such a link to suicide in adults. Alcoholism, drug abuse, other types of mental illness that go undiagnosed. Let's go to Steve in Massachusetts on line 1. The teen suicide saga, and now Fordham Prep, 2 young men throw themselves in front of Metro North trains within 2 weeks of each other, the last in front of a number of his classmates. Steve, go ahead.
In north central Massachusetts, we've had about 4 this year of students in high school, and believe it or not, middle school commit suicide. And it is just a terrible epidemic. Social media plays a part, interaction with the students, but also remember, please, that the veterans, there are 22 veterans, usually over 50, that commit suicide each and every day. These are veterans. And then 2 to 3 in the full-time military. It is an epidemic, Laura. It is terrible. It is also linked with opioid addiction and heroin.
Thank you for reminding me of that. The opioid addiction that is absolutely ravaging Vermont, New Hampshire, parts of Maine. Heroin. A lot of people saw the show Breaking Bad, which, if you don't know what heroin does to an individual, then, well, you will after this. It's horrific. But I guess in the case of these 2 young men, it's not clear that drugs had anything to do with it. Larry in South Carolina, line 3. Larry has a simple idea for all of this. Larry.
Yes, there's all kinds of different circumstances in each of the situations where all these kids are compelled to take this action. So it would be virtually impossible to come up with a government program or something to help out. Mm-hmm. But there is one situation that parents should and could take care of, and that is expose their children at a very early age to the saving grace and the guidance in the lives of Jesus Christ in their lives. Mm-hmm. And it's such a simple concept, yet some people just hear the word Jesus and then hate just dwells up within them. It's kind of scary the way the world is divided along those lines today.
But Larry, how about obviously in Scripture that I knew you before you were formed in the womb. You're so special and you're so important. You have such an important role to play no matter what skin color you have, no matter where you come from. It doesn't matter in the eyes of Christ. You are a unique human being created by God. And with God's grace, all things are possible. And you're right. That is, well, if you're a Christian, if you believe in Christianity, then that has to be a part of your daily life. And when things get really desperate, when things get really bad, you have to know that Christ's love will transform your life. And it will continually renew you. And that also suffering is part of our lives as Christians. Suffering, brings us closer to Christ. And, pick up your cross and carry it. Take your cross on. Wear your cross proudly. I think people come up to me as they did in Iowa. We were leaving. People think, oh, you're on TV. You have such a great life. And, and I do have a good life. But people see people who are on TV and they think, oh, you've got it made. Or Mike's like, if you could only see her walk into the show 5 seconds before it starts, managing the kids, the life Zet, all the stuff I'm doing. Nothing is some perfect image. It's not. I think you guys have been listening to me long enough to know that that's not my life. It's not no one's life. We all have our cross to bear. And for these kids, do you remember, Mike, being a 15-year-old kid and things would crush you that you look at today and you think, I can't believe I was so upset about that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you become so sad or angry about things that as a fully formed adult, you look back and you think, oh, God, that was stupid or that was silly. But your mind is changing. Your brain's changing. And so things that are seem like they just crush you back then, with a little time, you look back and you're like, yeah, that was kind of a bummer, but it's not something to have gotten so upset about. But when you're in that adolescent stage, wow, that's hard. It's a hard time. Let's go to Whitney on line 6. Whitney, go ahead. A pediatrician in Texas. Go ahead.
I'm a pediatrician in Austin, Texas, and a parent. And, suicide is terrifying for parents. It's also terrifying for pediatricians because of the impulsive nature of the act. You don't know if that child, when you're doing your checkups and checking in on their mental health and asking them about their friends, and it's hard to tell who's going to be the one that finds themselves in such a place of despair that they would be willing to attempt or commit suicide, because it's unlike in adults, it tends to be much more impulsive, and so that's the scary part, is being able to predict it. And so that's one of the things we're constantly striving for as pediatricians, is to have parents know what to look for. And, one of the things to look for is how healthy their friendships are, and who
are their friends?
Have someone to talk about.
Right. Who are their friends? Who are they? Do you know that? Do you really know your kids' friends? Whitney, you can stay on hold. 855-40-LAURA. We'll take a break. Signs, the 10 things you can do to prevent teen suicide. We'll talk about them when we come back. I have family that live in the Bay Area, and so you can't walk across the Golden Gate Bridge without thinking of the people who threw themselves off. I'm sorry, you just can't think. You can't avoid thinking about it. And all of the police officers and other first responders who prevented suicides off that bridge, and so many like it over the years. But people become desperate and hopeless, and they can't. They get to the place where they think it can never get better. It can never get better. It's never going to get better. But with the power of belief, your faith, your family, people who really love you, you can believe it's going to get better. But if it's a deep depression, it is a medical condition, and it has to be recognized, diagnosed, and dealt with properly. In some cases, it has to be dealt with medically, psychologically, psychiatrically, spiritually. There are a lot of different components to this. Whitney continues with us as a pediatrician in Austin, Texas. Whitney, give us a couple of warning signs that parents should look out for. I have 10 in front of me, but I'm curious, what are the warning signs that you've seen?
Well, the risk factors are what you might imagine: isolation, drug abuse. But for teens, depression may not present exactly the same way it does in adults. teens and even younger children, because in adults it'll present more as a depressed mood or feeling. In teenagers, it can present as anger or irritability. And so that's one of the ways to start knowing that it's time to ask. And so I don't know if I could name any of the others on your list of 10. Loss of interest in current activities that they might enjoy.
That's a big one. And I've known that. I knew that for a fact because of another example of a suicide. Someone who used to love to play soccer, was a star soccer player, suddenly says, I don't want to play anymore. A lot like that. 855-40-LAURA. I'm trying to help people here today on the Laura Ingraham Show. Don't go away. They're not the same people afterward and never will be again. What is at the heart of all this? Is it a spiritual emptiness, deficit? Is it impossible to ever really draw a connection among all these different desperate acts of our young people? It is an epidemic proportion in this country right now, and cluster suicides take place where we have copycats occur in a high school or junior high school setting. One occurs and then one or two more in short order, as happened this week at Fordham Prep, which is an all-Jesuit male high school in the New York area. These two young men, both sophomores, 15 and 16 years of age, threw themselves in front of the Metro North trains, and of course, a horrific death. And in one case, a number of the classmates of this student witnessed it. Let's go to John in Oregon on line 5. And your stories that you're going to share with me and how your life has been impacted by this could be very helpful to other people listening, especially people who have become themselves desperate at times. Let's face it, life can take you into a very dark place. We all like to put on this air that everything's perfect, but we know it's not. John, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Laura. Thank you for having me on. I believe you hit it right on the head when you said spiritual deficit. It's pretty obvious to me that there's not a lot of spiritualism outside of the connection with church and religious dogma, and these young people don't understand that their Creator created them with a pure spirit, that they're spiritual the day they're born, and that looking around themselves, they don't really see people dealing with each other in a spiritual manner. It's all in a, I'm bigger than you, I'll beat the heck out of you, I got this kind of politics, I'm going to do this, do this, do this. There's not a lot of spiritual congression,
kindness
outside of religious.
Well, that's part of, it's just pure kindness, compassion, caring about another person, taking time to slow down in your own life to say, how are you, and really mean it. When you're in this situation that so many of us find ourselves in, where you're rushing all the time, it's hard to have a conversation. Sometimes you feel like, I don't have time. I can't. Someone calls you. Do you have a minute to talk? I really don't. I've got to go. I'll call you later. Then you realize, oh my gosh, I never called him. I never called her. How many times in the course of a week does that happen to any of you? Maybe that call's a call you really should have taken, but you didn't. And how many of you throughout the course of a week say to yourself, oh my gosh, I've got to call my Aunt Mary Jane. Oh my gosh, I forgot to call my father or my mother. Oh, I've got to call them. And I think we all have to help each other to take a breath and make that connection. Reconnect. Make the connection. Take the time. Because when that person that you haven't connected with is no longer with us, you are going to wish that you took the 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your busy day to actually connect. And maybe even prevent someone from being really sad or depressed, or cheer someone up who's in a bad situation. Let's go to Mark in Alabama, who is a preacher. And Mark has a comment. The subject is a very uncomfortable one. A lot of people in talk radio won't talk about it, but I will. It's called suicide. Teen suicide. At a Plano high school in Texas, 2 teens committed suicide this past week. We'll talk about that as well. Another horrible story there. Mark, go ahead.
Laura, I'm an evangelist. I preach about 7 or 8 youth camps every summer. 26 years I've been preaching 45, 47 weeks out of the year. I preached to a lot of kids. These kids are cutting themselves. I'll go into a church and I'll say, how many of y'all know someone that cuts herself? In the last 20 years, I've never had a church where there wasn't at least 30 or 40 hands go up in a church of 100 people. This last summer, I had 3 kids that were cutters. They come to me after the service, want to talk to me. All 3 of them, because of being a cutter, I asked them the same question. Have you ever thought about killing yourself? All 3 of these kids said yes. And immediately I said, we've got to talk to your mom and dad about this. This is why I called. All 3 kids says, we can't talk to our mom and dad about this. I'm telling you, that just tears my heart out.
That's really sad.
Someone that can't talk to their own child. I know it sounds cliche, but communication is everything. And these kids that are cutters, that is a whole nother realm. You don't have enough time on your show.
No, that's a whole nother hour we can do.
It is, and I think it's linked together because if they want to hurt themselves that way, the ultimate is to take their life. And I know I don't have much time, but the greatest attribute that God gives mankind is the attribute to love. And if a kid does not feel like he's loved or he's caused love to be damaged, like if they take on themselves that the divorces happen.
Divorce is, divorce is oftentimes, there's some connection to a divorce in a lot of these stories. Thank you for raising it because I just read that, and I know in the couple of instances I'm talking about, divorce was part of it, but go ahead.
They blame themselves. I'm now getting young adults, Laura, that they'll show me their cuts. I talked to a lady that was 40. She had 30 or 40 cuts on her wrist, just low enough to where it don't, hit the artery. And she looked at me and she goes, I can't stop doing this.
Pastor Mark, thank you for that. That cuts just to hear about it. Does any of my staff? Did you know anybody who did this? You did. Catherine did know someone. Did you ever hear about that?
I did. Yes, there were multiple people in dorm rooms that have actually hung themselves in college. And I went to the University of Alabama. But as I was telling you, Laura, over the break, that universities, they don't talk about it for PR reasons. I mean, this happens more and more, and people don't realize it. But they keep it under the rug. Cutting
themselves too. This did people do this in previous generations? Cut themselves? I mean, I don't. Is this a modern phenomenon? I've just never read people cutting themselves as a epidemic. It seems like this is an epidemic, another epidemic. The caller mentioned parents and what a parent does to communicate or not. And I know for a fact in one of the instances that we've been referencing in these recent stories of dramatic teen suicides, in one case, the young woman commits suicide, and in one of the pieces I read, someone asked, well, where were the parents? And apparently the parents were in Europe. She's in high school. Parents were on a couple-week trip in Europe. So the child is alone or with a caretaker, a relative, or friend. The parents are in Europe. Now, does it mean parents can never go on vacation alone? I'm not saying that. But somehow that really... So when a child is in that much distress, parents are gone, feeling abandoned, can't talk. I'm not important enough for you to even be here. All of that. I mean, I think that was a pretty astute call. Do we talk at our kids? I mean, I just got report cards yesterday. I feel like I'm talking at my kids too much. Or do you talk with your kids? Tell me how things are going in school. And you have to, with kids, you say, what happened at school? Nothing. Did you have a good day? Yeah. You really have to kind of ask questions in unique ways to get answers from kids because they tend to be monosyllabic. Yeah, it was good. Did you have fun? Yeah. You have to really dig. You have to be there for a longer period of time, and you can't get information out of kids or even their feelings with just a quickie. How's it going? Good. Gotta go. It doesn't work that way. You have to really spend extended periods of time with your children to really get to know what is happening in their minds, their developing minds, with their friends at school. Anyone upset at school? I mean, I dig for information. Then usually 20 minutes later, I find out the truth. But Sometimes it's sequestering the witnesses, but you really do have to dig to find the truth. And again, my kids are young. 855-40-LAURA. Keeping kids out of isolation, bringing them into the fold of a religious community, a faith-based community. Maybe some of you call it a spiritual community. Feeling like you're loved. If a child feels like he or she is not loved, wow, that's a hard place to be for a little kid. Hard place to be for a teenager who's already going through the hormone changes and the heartbreak and the crushes that are unrequited. But if you feel like you're not loved and there's no point to it all, that's a very low place that you can get to. We'll take your calls, close it out. Do you know anyone who came to this point and turned his or her life around? And how did it happen? Don't go away. And then her classmate, another 17-year-old, was found in a wooded area close to the school stadium. Both, looks like the suicides are related. They were both good friends. So sad. Collin County, Texas. This was this week as well. Let's go to Dan in Florida. Dan, as a father, you lost your son to suicide. I'm so sorry, first of all. It doesn't mean anything to say I'm sorry, but maybe sharing your story could help somebody. So tell us what happened.
Well, he asphyxiated himself. 17-year-old, fixing to go in the Navy, life was pretty good. I can see now, looking back, there were signs I should have seen. And I would say that's one of the things, just from a parental aspect of it, is that, hindsight is 20/20. The other thing that I will say, and I continue to see that with people of his age and older now, and even with my daughter who's 2 years older, social media develops and helps to develop very shallow friendships and very esoteric social skills. The same things that we dealt with as young people, and we didn't have social media. We just had our mom and dad, aunts and uncles, close people around us, our real friends. Kids these days go to the internet to get advice. They go to some clown they've never met before who's a friend on Facebook of a friend of a friend. So that's one of the things that scares me. Zach was a Christian. In fact, I immersed him. And really, I understand and I believe, yes, that a relationship with Christ is key. But I also think that sometimes there is a sickness, and we have to do a better job as parents of monitoring everything. And if I had to do it all over again, there are many things I would do differently.
How old was your son, Zach?
Zach was 17 when I lost him. Like I say, he was fixing to go in the Navy. Had you would think life by the tail. Good kid. He was my third kid, so it seems kind of a typical that third kids are the easiest. Never really had any issues out of him. Maybe it's just because I'm a curmudgeon, but social media is the devil. Now, I participate in it, and if we could keep kids out of it until they were 25 and 26 and a little better developed, then I would say okay.
Dan, thank you for sharing that story. That is tough. I don't know anything tougher. I mean, honestly. Remember our new website, lauraingraham.com. We're going to post a lot today on this subject, what we can do better as friends, as parents, colleagues, to maybe step in before something horrific happens. At least look out for the warning signs. And say our prayers for all these families that have lost teenagers especially, or parents to this affliction of suicide. So before you would try on something and call a friend, or in the old days, you just tried on something, you bought it, and then you got home and you're like, why did I buy this?
There you go.
Then you went back to the store and you bought something, and your mother would say, what did you spend that money for? We can't afford that. But and then when you get cell phones, you would take a picture of yourself in the outfit and send it to a friend and say, or text it and say, how do you like this or not like this?
What do you think?
No, what do you think? How am I looking? Does this dress make like butt look big? No, your big butt makes your big butt look big. That's what it is. That's from Spike Lee's movie. She's Gotta Have It. You've got to have it. So she's got to have it. Why did I say you've got? She's got to have it. That movie was hilarious. That line, Mike, just for that line, you have to get the movie and watch it this weekend. I'm telling you, you will scream when that line comes up. Yes. So now you go in to a fitting room at one of these retailers, and you may run into one of these smart mirrors. And so you could try on a shirt, and will it suggest a pants to go with that? Is that how it works? And it's doing a real-time video. It has a chip in it. It's doing a real-time video of you trying it on, and then it matches you up with other things.
Go look at yourself.
Well, is this to make it easier to try on things? Does it mean you don't have to try on as many things, or it just means that they bring you more things into
your selection, so you know what you want?
But they bring more things into the room for you. But this is like the full body scanners at the airport. Exactly. Okay, you know somebody is in another room, and we found out they were, in fact, with the whatever those things are called. That they were looking at the pictures of your person and how you looked and whether you had a big butt or other things, and that was weird. And now you know this is going to be hacked into. Here's my question. Number one, do you even go to stores to buy clothing any longer? Do you really try on clothing? Where do you go to do this? Maybe you do it for a special occasion where you need a particular dress, like when Mike's looking for that prom dress that he wants. He'll go.
I was going to go with my wedding.
A Macy's to try on like 4 really killer ruffled pink and aqua dresses. So that's what Mike will do.
4 inches above the knee.
Yeah, we just make it a micro mini dress.
Yes.
But if it's that, maybe you go to the store. Like if I had to go to something like some black tie thing, and I have to buy something new, I'm sick of my clothes, I will go and try stuff on. Let me just say, I am so not the girly girl, which I know will shock all of you. I despise shopping. I cannot stand to go to stores. I can't stand the process, the parking, the pawing through all these racks and trying to find the right size. And then you get in the dressing room, you try it on, and you're just depressed because it either looks terrible or you thought, gosh, I thought I was in pretty good shape. Ooh, the mirror with the 3 panels. All of a sudden, like, oh my God, there's 3 of me. Back off. Back up the camera to Hoboken, as they said in the movie Tootsie. Back it up. You just don't want to see it. At least I don't. I mean, when you're 15 or 16, I think that's kind of fun. But get a little older, I think most people just don't want to try on clothes. Do you try on clothes at stores? I know men don't. Men don't try on anything, do you?
No.
You just order online and you get it, and then you send it back.
I think the last thing I tried on was a pair of jeans.
Well, the hoodies kind of are one size fits all, the kinds you get. So
where
are you really trying those on?
I have gotten the small hoodies. And
Drew, do you go and try on clothing at stores?
No, I'm like you, Laura. I typically do it online.
Yeah, you just don't. Well, you have a classic, 31-inch waist? You're skinny.
Yeah, I'm a 32.
32, so that's classic, easy. Mike, you're a 38. What are you? What's your waist?
What is my waist? 40.
40,
well,
okay.
Button downs are easy too. I know that I'm 34 length on them.
So it's
16
easy.
collars,
well, men have a much easier situation than we women.
We just don't care.
You just don't. You don't care.
Well, we know you don't care.
We know you don't care, but Drew is looking
give
smart.
Me a T-shirt and I'm fine.
Right. Okay. So this is all he cares about. But do you go to stores? And if not, why not? But would you be less likely to go into one of these stores with these smart mirrors?
These things are going to get hacked so fast.
No, I am so not interested in a smart mirror. I want a dumb mirror. I want a mirror that does nothing except give me a sense that I'm 15 pounds less than I am. Okay.
What else?
A smart mirror is a mirror that basically all it does is every time you get in front of it, it says, "Ooh, you look good." That's a smart mirror because that'll help you sell stuff. So go. And every time you walk in with a new outfit, it has a new compliment. Looking good. Oh, you look marvelous. Oh, it's like sexy. I mean, that would be funny. And you would be, I want to buy this outfit. Maybe it's a little too kitschy, but something like that is smart. But this thing is a dumb mirror. A chip that will record your outfits and send these sales clerks things to bring in to have you try on.
So yeah, now it's also collecting data on the fashion
on
trends.
the shopper. Yes, on the shopper, what your preferences are.
Exactly.
And then they're going to push ads to you. This is another way to push advertising at you. By the way, who else hates going to the gas station and having to see really bad programming on the gas pump now?
The TVs.
You can't get away from screens. You in the cabs in New York City or Washington, to the extent that you're ever taking cabs, there's a screen. I rushed to push it off when I'm with Maria last weekend in New York because there's some horrible ad for these women in thongs and what. Maria's looking, what is that? I go, I'm like reaching over to turn it off.
And the ads are loud too. I mean,
they're
it's a
really
video.
loud. But you have to affirmatively turn it off instead of having it off and affirmatively having to choose to see these bad things. You know what else I hate? This is I Hate Friday. Okay, this is what
That's fine.
Laura's I Hate Friday. I'm just going to go on rants like Maxine on the Hallmark cards. Okay, the signs on the top of cabs, James, you're going to love this. On the top of cabs, gentlemen's clubs all over New York City with the women who are they're lying down on some piano. Why do you lie on a piano? What are you going to do on a piano? I don't want to know what you're going to do on a piano, but you're not playing the piano. And it's like gentlemen's clubs. XXX. Again, Maria says, "Mom, what's that?" Oh, I said, that's a comedy. It's a joke about men who can't get into clubs. She's like, oh, okay. I should tell her the truth, I guess, but I'm not telling her the truth because it's too horrifying. So our children have to see this. Every movement we make, we have to be bombarded by this nonsense. And now we have to go, all of us who can't stand, as it is, we can't stand trying on clothes. Now we have to have this dumb smart mirror that records some of our outfits and then pushes information out to clerks and advertisers, and it's all going to be a disaster.
What about when kids go into these dressing rooms? They don't even know.
No.
They have no idea. It's going to get all recorded.
As with most technology these days, data plays a big role. Stores hope to track fashion trends and habits, the likes and the dislikes. That has privacy advocates concerned.
So as long as the customers know and are given a right to choose what's collected or what their interactive experience is, that probably makes sense to most people. But our concern is clandestine or surreptitious collection of data.
855-40-LAURA. Do you buy clothes in the store that you have to try on regularly?
Oh, Becca doesn't.
Routinely.
Becca doesn't.
Do you do this? Yes or no? 855-40-LAURA. Shopping smart mirrors. Do you shop? If you don't shop, why don't you shop to try on clothes? We'll take a break. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. We have a lot to get to, but there's campus craziness. I mean, we have to get caught up on these stories just so you understand how our young people are being propagandized and brainwashed on this political correctness, intolerance for diverse viewpoints, intolerance for conservative viewpoints. There's a monolith being crammed down students' throats on college campuses. And if you dare challenge the monopolized speech that they traffic in, if you dare challenge it, then you'll probably get graded down. You'll probably be brought up before the student disciplinary committee on charges, and you probably won't get any job recommendations by your professors. From your professors. This is the atmosphere we've encouraged on college campuses, and now they're able to deny a speaking engagement to someone as esteemed and has an incredible career as David Clark because why? He's on Fox News and he doesn't like Black Lives Matter? Milwaukee Sheriff David Clark was disinvited from speaking about forensics, so that's a controversial topic, at the University of New Haven because of his conservative views. And his views were deemed too polarizing. See, Black Lives Matter shouting pigs in a blanket about police, that's not polarizing. But Sheriff Clark actually talking about the need to respect police officers, that is polarizing. Clark had been invited to speak at the 25th annual Markle Symposium, but claimed in an op-ed last week that he had been disinvited for making controversial statements. Well, he'd been disinvited because of the tweets that he had made and sent out about Black Lives Matter protests. Apparently, he said, the higher-ups didn't want me to speak due to my Black Lives Matter position. And, of course, he's black. Oh, they hate black conservatives on college campuses. I mean, look at what they've done to Justice Thomas. I mean, we're going to be talking about that next segment. Look at what they've done to vilify Justice Thomas. Again, conservatives never get the benefit of the doubt, but liberals can do the most horrific things to women, objectify women, call them hoes and all sorts of names in their horrible song lyrics, and they're celebrated and elevated by our culture. But if you're a conservative and you're accused of anything, they will immediately convict you in the court of public opinion or otherwise. And right down the road in New Haven at Yale University, Yale played Dartmouth, I guess it was last weekend in football. And they were celebrating the anniversary of the Dartmouth-Yale football game, which is always a big rivalry. And they put on the program, old program covers, and they just showed what it looked like 40, 50 years ago. And one of the programs was from the image of the program on the cover of the new program was from 1944, and it showed a Yale player setting fire to an American Indian's clothing. I mean, it was a cartoon image because we were the Dartmouth Indians. And the executive director of Yale's Indigenous Performing Arts program, you can't even make this up, called the images dehumanizing. Yale athletic director Tom Beckett acknowledged to the New Haven Register that the cover was offensive. I'm offended by their fecklessness and wimpishness. That's what I'm so offended that now athletic directors are whipped into this politically correct frenzy. It's dehumanizing? It's a cartoon. This is a cartoon. This is all it is. And it's from 1944 when people didn't get so wound up about the Indian name. And by the way, most Indian chiefs, as the Washington Post confirmed, which confirmed my old poll of Indian chiefs from back when I was at Dartmouth, that like 85% of Indians have no problem with the Indian symbol.
I actually think it was 9 out of 10.
Oh, it was 9 out of 10. Well, yeah. It was 83% when I did it in 1985 or whatever, when I did the poll with the Gallup organization. So Indians don't care. It's liberal, weenies on college campuses who care about the Indian symbol. They are so offended by the Indian symbol, but they're fine if. Remember that UT story where those young women at University of Texas walked around with those male anatomy. Remember they were protesting something at UT. What were they protesting? I can't remember what they were protesting, but they walked around all day with their. I don't even want to say the word, but it was just gross. It was disgusting. What was it, Drew?
They were protesting, remember, the gun laws because now you have the right to carry. So they were all up and out about it. They had these sex toys. They had a bunch of dildos, et cetera. We don't need to get into all that. Yeah. But anyway, that's what they were protesting.
Oh,
gun laws.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
That's not offensive. Oh, yeah. Okay. Coming up on the Laura Ingraham Show, Mark Paoletta, former assistant White House counsel to Bush 41. And he's a lawyer. He's going to talk to us about what the African American Museum, which is this giant museum, new museum on the Mall in Washington, just opened up to a lot of critical acclaim. And yet what they do and do not say about my former boss, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, coming up. None of the accusations against him would have been relevant. None of them at all. But the Smithsonian Museum, African American Museum, and it's all under the Smithsonian, to not even recognize Justice Thomas. He's only the second black justice to sit on the Supreme Court after Thurgood Marshall. And it's like he doesn't exist except through their lens of scandal. But the only one who's probably not surprised about this is Justice Thomas. I mean, he's just used to it. But these people, they never forget. And they never get over it. They just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And meanwhile, we throw our people overboard all the time. At the slightest provocation, we throw our people overboard. But they stick with their people. And Anita Hill was their gal of the moment. They stick with Anita Hill all the way back to 1987. This was 29 years ago. Think about that. Joining us now is Mark Paoletta, an old friend, a former assistant White House counsel to Bush 41. He was one of the original, he's an adopted clerk in the Justice Thomas chambers. We have some adopted clerks, and he's one of them, but he's just one of the most one of the stellar human beings in Washington, D.C., and a great friend of the justices and a great supporter during that very trying confirmation hearing period. And he joins us now for reflection on the culture intolerance among us. Mark, good to talk to you. How are you?
Hey, Laura. Good to be on.
So, are you surprised that the African American Museum only references Justice Thomas in terms of Anita Hill?
As you just said, Laura, I'm not surprised. It's the same old, same old. We were talking a couple of months ago about that ridiculous movie that HBO trotted out to attack the justice, and you're right, they don't forget. I went to the museum. I went to the new museum and walked around for 3 or 4 hours, and it's stunning. It's stunning. They have several references to Anita Hill in there. A big photo of her. They have a button, I believe Anita Hill button, and they have nothing on Clarence Thomas. They also have a couple of references or pictures and photos of Al Sharpton and other great people, but nothing on, as you said, our second black justice, our longest-serving black justice in the United States history, and who's written more than 500 opinions. Tom Goldstein, who runs SCOTUS blog, calls him our greatest justice for the idea that he's introduced into the court's jurisdiction, into the jurisprudence, and yet here's a guy who's overcome, right, born in the segregated South, an amazing American story, and there's nothing on him.
Oh my gosh, his autobiography. What is it called? My grandfather's son.
My grandfather's son.
My grandfather's son, because he was raised by his grandfather, and it is so. Gosh, I remember reading it, and of course I know him so well. So reading it, I cried during this book. It was it was so moving, and you see the character of the man as developed through hardship and through great trials in life. And
you know him, Laura,
mm-hmm.
and I actually set up a website called justicethomas.com
mm-hmm.
where it has a bunch of articles. It actually has your interview with him back in 2007, I think in October this month, where you interviewed him on your show. And I have a lot of other interviews. I have a lot of other articles, some law review articles, just so people can have a place to go to learn about this great man. It's called justicethomas.com.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's interesting in wake of Justice Scalia's death, how much more important Justice Thomas becomes on the Supreme Court as really the last reliable, solid. Well, I guess Alito would be described as that as well. But just because Alito's far newer to the court than Thomas, I mean, Thomas takes on far greater importance. Don't you agree?
Absolutely agree. Two things on that, Laura. One of them is the smear on Justice Thomas, right, that he was Scalia's puppet, right? And that was something that I believe is a absolutely racist attack on him. There's no evidence of it. And in fact, quite the contrary, right? From his very first day on the court, he was changing Scalia's vote in conference, as revealed by Jan Crawford's book, great book. And, and he's now become more important. And I think, because he's an originalist that's really, and you know this, but unbound really by precedent, right? I mean, Alito's a lot different, right? And he says this, right? That if there's precedent on the books, he's going to really stay in those lanes. But Thomas is not, does not think that way, and that's what's exciting about his jurisprudence, right? Is revisiting lots of old settled cases that are wrong, right? And even more so than Scalia, he's there. And now he's turning to the administrative state, and he's just going sort of section by section through the Constitution, right, with this eye that's going to make it right in his view.
Well, I love reading the liberals who've written about Justice Thomas quite glowingly over the years. Their original take on Thomas was that, you're right, he was just an echo of Scalia. But then they actually, I guess, started reading his opinions, and he and Scalia disagreed on reasoning a lot. They often were in agreement, but not always, on important issues. And significant issues they disagreed on. But they often came down on different reasoning. And so their judgment was based on a different analysis of a particular case. And finally, the legal writers have begun to understand that and write about it, and that actually has been fairly heartening.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm sort of collecting these reviews. But Tom Goldstein, Akhil Amar, right? Mark Tushnet, who was a vociferous opponent of Thomas when he first went on the bench, has called him making enduring a contribution to the court's jurisprudence. So yeah, it's really come along. It's the partisans, unfortunately, right? It's this new museum that continue either their attacks or their omissions on the justice. But you're right. The legal world and the academics are starting to catch up with the fact that the justice has this amazing record, this very well-developed jurisprudence that is his own, that is different than Scalia's. They often get to the same place, and a lot of times they don't, right? Or oftentimes they don't, but for different reasons. So it's exciting in that regard, and I think, as much as anyone, he's undaunted, right? All of these attacks, all of these criticisms, and he's just going to keep rolling along, laying down his jurisprudence. And I think confident that the court's jurisprudence will catch up with him.
Mark Paoletta, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for the website. And the Wall Street Journal this week had a piece that was very interesting. Tech boom creates too few jobs. Dashed employment promises of the 1990s fuel Donald Trump's political rise. The technology revolution has delivered Google searches, Facebook friends, iPhone apps, Twitter rants, and shopping for almost anything on Amazon, all in the past decade and a half. But what it hasn't delivered are many jobs. Google's Alphabet Inc. and Facebook Inc. had at the end of last year a total of 74,505 employees, about 1/3 fewer than Microsoft, even though their combined stock value is twice as big. Photo sharing service Instagram had 13 employees when it was acquired for $1 billion by Facebook in 2012. They're rich. Hiring in the computer and chip sectors dove after companies shifted hardware production outside of the United States. Thank you, World Trade Organization Chinese membership. Thank you, normalized trade relationship with China, moving all these jobs overseas and shrinking the American workforce. So the newer tech giants needed relatively few workers, writes the journal. The number of technology startups fizzled, growth in productivity and wages slowed, and income inequality rose as machines replaced routine, low and middle income, human-powered work. And the outcome is a far cry from what many in the political world, and in fact, tech entrepreneurs and economists were predicting a generation ago. And consider what Bill Clinton said in his last State of the Union speech. Listen to what he said. America will lead the world toward shared peace and prosperity and the far frontiers of science and technology. His economic team trumpeted, quote, the ferment of rapid technological change as one of the U.S. economy's principal engines of growth. Of course, the gap between what the tech boom promised and what it delivered is yet another source of the rumbling national discontent that powered the rise of Donald Trump. This is reality we're talking about. These aren't promises that are going to not pan out again. I'm telling you what the truth is. The jobs are not being created by these high-tech industries. Why? Because the actual manufacturing has both been it's been made more efficient through robotics, but much bigger than robotics is the offshoring of the jobs, offshoring of manufacturing, offshoring of major production facilities. And what happens is, even in this report I was looking back on from 4 years ago, there was a interview with the CEO of this small steel, they make steel baskets and other things. And they were asking him, the reporter from, I believe it was CBS, asked him about computers and robots and how that changes the workplace. And the man in the report said, well, yeah, I'm the CEO of this company, and the only way for us to compete against the cheaters in China is to use more robots for our work. That's the only way for us to compete. So we have to have more dynamic answers to the employment problems in this country. We can't just We just can't keep doing what we're doing. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of young men, especially, who have no jobs. And that means more drug abuse, more family breakup, more dysfunction, more crime, and more anger. And again, I certainly haven't heard Hillary Clinton address this. Trump has at least talked about redoing these trade deals, which I think is really smart. But Hillary Clinton has no answer for any of this. Absolutely. But again, wouldn't you like to hear a conversation about this in the debate? Like, what are you going to do? When you add up Facebook and Google, they are about a third of the Microsoft employees. Microsoft obviously makes stuff too. They're the third of Microsoft employees, even though they're double in size. Now, that's scary. That is a truly frightening. You know what else is scary? Clowns. I hate clowns. I hate the clown trend. I don't like clowns, never have. I don't like happy clowns, don't like sad clowns, don't like mimes. I can't stand mimes. The mimes in Central Park, they do this, they pretend they're walking up a wall, the white
Trapped
face.
in the Box, of course, classic.
Trapped in the Box. I can't, the old fishing reel, reel it back. I don't know, it's all tedious, can't stand it. But the scary clown epidemic has now led the folks at McDonald's to, they're putting less emphasis now on Ronald McDonald. First of all, don't change your brand because some idiots are doing. I don't agree with that. Ronald McDonald is Ronald McDonald. He's probably the only clown I do like is Ronald McDonald. And I want to go back to the old, really unhealthy French fries too. I hate the new French fries. They're not as good as the old ones. The old ones were, I know, bad for you, but they really tasted much better. Don't you agree, James?
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
You can't even compare the taste. The taste now is like kind of tasteless cardboard.
I think it has to do with the oil that they were using because it was like animal oil, and then vegetarians were getting all upset about it, so they had to change. It's just not the same anymore.
No, it doesn't taste as good. So they're getting rid of the Ronald McDonald, at least for the time being. And they're also, another thing that they're doing at McDonald's is they're now, instead of Ronald McDonald on the walls and the old characters they used to have on the walls, now they're putting graffiti. They're copying the, quote, great graffiti artists in Europe. So all through the European McDonald's, they're putting that stupid graffiti all over the walls, and customers are complaining. Good. I'm glad they are. It's unpalatable. It's not going to make me want to eat or go to McDonald's. Just look at the lousy graffiti. And don't call it art. It's graffiti, okay? Get a canvas or get something else. It's not art.